You took a personality test once. Maybe it was for a job or a relationship app or just out of curiosity. And the result came back and it said something like, you are introverted, conscientious, slightly neurotic, high in openness. And part of you nodded. That does sound right. That does sound like me. But here is the question nobody asked you after that test. What if the traits you just read about yourself were not formed by your childhood or your culture or your choices? What if they were locked in place 100,000 years ago by a world you will never see? That is not a metaphor. That is a hypothesis supported by a growing body of evidence. And once you understand it, you will never look at your own behavior the same way again. Your personality is not random. It is not an accident of upbringing. It is, in large part, an ancient solution to an ancient problem. The question is, which problem was yours solved for? Let us start with something that sounds simple but is not. Why do people have different personalities at all? Think about that for a moment. If evolution optimizes for survival, why would it produce introverts and extroverts? Why would it create some humans who rush toward novelty and others who flinch from it? Why would anxiety of all things persist across hundreds of generations instead of being bred out? If anxious people were worse at surviving, anxious people should have disappeared. But they did not. They are everywhere. You might be one of them. The answer, according to researchers like Daniel Nettle of Newcastle University, is that personality traits are not mistakes. They are strategies. Each major personality dimension you carry reflects a different cost-benefit trade-off that was useful in a specific ancestral environment. Your personality is not who you chose to be. It is who your ancestors needed someone to be. Nettle spent years mapping personality traits against evolutionary outcomes. What he found was striking. High extroversion comes with real advantages. More mating opportunities, more social alliances, more food gathered through cooperative risk-taking. But it also comes with costs. Extroverts have higher rates of accidental injury. They take more physical risks. In a world where a wrong step meant a broken leg that could kill you, recklessness was a liability. So the population did not converge on extroversion, it split. Some humans were built for boldness, others were built for caution, and both survived. That is the key insight. Both strategies worked. Now think about what that means for you specifically. If you are someone who hangs back in a crowd, who thinks before speaking, who would rather read alone than perform for an audience, that behavior pattern was not an accident of your childhood shyness. It is a trait that persisted because in at least some ancestral environments, the careful observer outlasted the loud risk-taker. Your brain was tuned for a world where watching and waiting was often the smarter move. And if you are someone who walks into a room and immediately starts talking, who finds silence uncomfortable, who craves new faces and new places, that too is an inheritance. Your ancestors were the ones who built coalitions, who explored new territories, who gathered information by engaging rather than withdrawing. Their boldness fed their families, and now it lives in you. Here is where it gets stranger. Because personality is not just about extroversion and introversion. Psychologists have identified 5 major dimensions that seem to appear across every human culture ever studied. They call it the Big Five. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, every culture, every continent, every era of recorded psychological data. The same 5 factors show up. That kind of universality is not a cultural artifact. It is a signal of something deeper. Robert McCrae and Paul Costa, who spent decades cataloging personality data from over 50 countries, found that the Big Five structure was consistent across cultures as different as Zimbabwe and Japan, Nigeria and Germany. That should be impossible if personality were purely shaped by culture. You cannot have the same underlying structure in cultures that have been isolated from each other for thousands of years, unless that structure predates the cultures, unless it is older than all of them, which means it almost certainly came from somewhere else. It came from the environment that shaped every single one of those cultures before they became cultures at all. It came from the savannah, from the cave, from the small group of 50 to 150 people your ancestors spent their entire lives inside. Think about that group, that band of humans. Every single day of your ancestors' life was spent with the same people, the same faces, the same social dynamics. There was no escape, no moving to a new city, no starting over. If you destroyed a relationship in that group, you lived with the wreckage forever. And so the group needed certain things to function. It needed some people who were agreeable, who smoothed conflicts, who kept the peace. It needed some people who were conscientious, who remembered where the water was, who planned ahead, who stored food correctly. It needed some people who were open to new experiences, who were willing to try the unfamiliar plant or follow the unfamiliar animal trail. It needed some people who were neurotic, who worried constantly, who ran the threat assessments nobody else wanted to run. Every single one of your personality traits served a role in that group. You were not just a person, you were a function. Now here is the part that most people miss. Neuroticism, the trait that psychologists link to anxiety, to rumination, to emotional instability. Of all 5 traits, this is the one people are most ashamed of, the one they most want to change. But consider what neuroticism actually is at its core. It is a heightened sensitivity to threat. It is a brain that never fully relaxes, a brain that is always running a background check on the environment, always asking, is this safe? Is this person trustworthy? Is that noise a predator or the wind? In the modern world, that brain creates anxiety disorders, sleepless nights, and a tendency to catastrophize every email. But in the ancestral world, that brain kept people alive. Researcher Elaine Aron, who spent years studying what she calls the highly sensitive person, found that roughly 20% of humans, and a similar percentage of over 100 other animal species, appear to carry a more reactive nervous system than the rest of the population. 20% across species. That number is too consistent to be a glitch. It is a design feature. 1 in 5 members of any group was built to be the early warning system. Your anxiety is not a flaw, it is a smoke detector. It is just firing in a world where most of the fires are not real anymore. And that mismatch is at the heart of everything strange about your personality, because your traits were calibrated for a world that no longer exists. The introvert who rehearses conversations before having them was built for a world where one wrong social move could get you exiled, and exile meant death. The perfectionist who cannot submit work until it is exactly right was built for a world where a poorly constructed spear or a badly preserved piece of meat had lethal consequences. The person who cannot resist chasing novelty, who gets bored in any stable situation, was built for a world where the group needed someone willing to scout ahead, even when it was dangerous. All of these behaviors made sense once. They still make sense at a biological level. Your body does not know the world changed. Your nervous system does not know you are safe. It is still running the ancient program in an environment the program was never designed for. Now here is the counterintuitive twist. Most people spend enormous amounts of energy trying to change their personality. Introverts try to perform extroversion. Anxious people try to think their way out of anxiety. Disagreeable people try to suppress the friction they create. But research by Brent Roberts at the University of Illinois, who has conducted some of the most comprehensive longitudinal studies on personality change, suggests that the core dimensions of your personality are remarkably stable across your lifetime. They shift slightly. Conscientiousness tends to rise in early adulthood. Agreeableness tends to rise in middle age. Neuroticism tends to decline slowly over decades, but the structure doesn't collapse. The person you are at 25 is recognizably the same person you are at 65. That is not depressing. Once you understand where your traits came from, it changes the relationship entirely. You stop seeing your personality as a problem to be fixed and start seeing it as a tool that was built for a specific job. The question stops being, how do I become someone else? The question becomes, what is my ancient function, and how do I use it well in the world I actually live in? The anxious person learns to deploy that threat detection in careers that actually need it: medicine, engineering, safety systems, risk management. The disagreeable person learns to channel that friction into roles where challenge and pushback create better outcomes: law, research, quality control, leadership. The introvert uses the depth of focus that came from all those hours of careful observation to produce work that requires sustained attention no extrovert can easily access. You were not given a random assortment of traits. You were given a specific configuration, a set of tendencies that solved real problems in a real environment for real people who survived because of them. Those people are the reason you exist. The next time you catch yourself wishing you were different, stop for a moment. Consider that 100,000 years ago, someone very much like you was sitting at the edge of a fire, doing exactly what you do, watching carefully when others rushed in, worrying when others slept, exploring when others stayed put, creating when others consumed. That person made it through every danger, every famine, every rival group, every long dark winter. And the traits that got them through are still running in you right now. You did not choose your personality, but it chose you for a reason. The question has never been who you are. The question is what you do with who you were built to be. Tonight, when you catch yourself doing the thing you always do, the thing you have always done, the thing you sometimes wish you could stop doing, remember this: that is not just you. That is 100,000 years of someone surviving. And it worked. There is always more to know about what it means to be human. Subscribe, and let's keep finding out together.